Hey guys, Gramble here, back at it again in Krispy Kremes, and today we're talking about Death Battle again. With the end of Season 7 and Season 8 already in full swing, I thought I'd give my 6 cents on what I thought of Season 7 overall. For me, it was a very mixed season. Really good episodes, and really bad episodes. Some episodes will become classics, the others will be forgotten forever. Before we start, I'm going to go ahead and give a big ol' spoiler warning right here and now, since I'm going to be talking about the entirety of the season and all of its episodes, so if you haven't seen it, please go watch it and then come back. And lastly, this is just my opinion. Everyone's preference is going to vary. Some episodes on here might be lower than you expect, some episodes might be higher than you expect. All I ask is you be respectful about it, because professionals have standards. Basically, just don't take any of this shit personally, alright? With that out of the way, let us begin, shall we? Oh, god damn it, I forgot this episode was a thing. Okay, Gran, you can do this. You can talk about this episode. Fuck this episode. This episode to me is like a male comb beat. Because I ask, every time I see it, why do you even exist? Okay, before I rip this thing a new asshole, I'll go over what I actually liked about it first. They got Dante Bosco to voice Zuko, so that's pretty cool. And, 1/3 of the soundtrack is good. Okay, time to rip into this episode and explain why it's the worst current Death Battle episode. Let's start with the matchup itself. Wow, does it suck. Connections, fire, scars, and daddy issues. Okay, not the best, but whatever. When it was announced, I immediately thought of two things. Zuko was gonna die, and Shoto's gonna fuck over any animation potential this episode was gonna have. To put the first one bluntly, you want a matchup with zero debate, zero conversation, and just all around just uninteresting in general? Here you go. Literally the second it was announced, everyone in the community collectively said, Zuko finna die. Then there's the animation. Oh my god, the animation was fucking awful. It's slow, it's janky, it's uninteresting, like seriously. Compare this to Miles vs. Static, Gray vs. Azda, and the episode before this, fucking Beerus vs. Galaxia. This is just sad. Hell, even later sprite fights mostly deliver on what good animation could look like. It doesn't help too that the dialogue was super cringy. All the close-ups look fucking atrocious. Hey, Zero vs. Metal Sonic called, it wants its close-ups back. Then there's the research. If you can even call it that, there were no calcs in the episode other than whose fire is hotter. Like what? You didn't even give a number for the lightning timing or even the ice wall. Like what the fuck? It just seems like lazy script writing to me. Now, to give some lineage and credence to Death Battle, I don't blame them for fucking up this episode. I blame it on two factors. COVID-19, because of the pandemic, it got pushed back to later in the season instead of being in the first half as planned. And believe it or not, Shoto. Yeah, no joke. Shoto is the reason this episode is ass. He's such a bland character, it boggles my mind why people like him versus Zuko more than Roy or Cinder. Actually, to be fair, I know why people like him over Cinder, but even then, that's not exactly an upgrade itself. And even then, he's basically screwing over Zuko out of two other characters who have better episode potentials than he does. Whether that be character-wise, like in the case of Roy Mustang, or just having better animation potential in the form of Cinder. Hell, even Rain would have been a better option than Shoto. And side note, I find it pretty ironic people say Roy had no good potential for animation because he just stands around and snaps his fingers. Because that's exactly what Shoto does 99% of the time. And look where it got us. I think what I absolutely hate about this episode is the fact that there was nothing in it I was looking forward to. The animation sucked. The research was terrible. The jokes were annoying, and the way they made Endeavor out to be more evil than fucking Fire Hitler is the icing on the crab cake. This matchup is an utter, complete joke. And now you see why I put that opinion thing at the beginning of the video. I know for a fact I'm gonna get a fuck ton of backlash for this in the community. Whatever. Oh yeah, I forgot this was a thing. You know, I look at this episode like a male comb beat. Okay, you get the idea already, let's move on. You know, despite me absolutely saying Zuko vs. Shiro was an utter train wreck, this episode is about the train cars being compacted. I don't even know what the fuck I'm saying anymore, and it's only number 19. Well, I'll say this. The reason I rank this higher than Zuko Hot was the fact that it actually did some shit way better, and I actually enjoyed the episode. Now, the matchup itself. Not that bad. In fact, I was kinda happy when this was happening. I love the original Batman vs. Spider-Man. I think it's a cult classic amongst the Death Battle community and Death Battle in general. It'll always stick around as that really good Marvel vs. DC episode from Season 1. Plus, I heard that they wanted to actually do a rematch of these two characters, which I was on board for. I think it deserves to get another rundown. So doing instead different characters this time around like they did with Wally West, with Archie Sonic, I think was a perfect idea. The analysis for this episode is actually really good. It actually had calcs in them, and the reasoning for why Gwen won was pretty solid overall, and it did a good job explaining it. That's probably the best praise I can give this episode. The pacing in this episode overall is pretty good, but there are a few moments where it'll lag, but it's not, like, too bad. And despite the animation looking worse than an SMG4 video, the memeability of this episode is just great. Also, a nice callbacks in there as well with the Sam Raimi films. Plus, there's actually some pretty cool shots in here that work very well and look kinda smooth for the most part. But for every good little thing, there were two things that kinda screwed it up though. The music isn't very memorable, and the animation, for the most part, just kinda sucks. Like, Jesus Christ, bro. The Source Filmmaker team did not do a good job on this episode. And that's a shame, since they did an amazing job with Ganon vs. Dracula and Obi-Wan vs. Kakashi. Two fights with good interactions, effects, and animations. The dialogue also is just, again, super cringy and out of character for both. Also, there's some serious jank to all the animation in this episode. Like, look at the top of Gwen's wrist, bro, what the fuck? Also, the transitions to certain scenes look pretty awkward overall. Running animations and so many out of character moments also look really bad. However, what I think this fight did well at was pointing out what works in Source Filmmaker and what doesn't. Hand-to-hand and fight choreography do not look good at all in Source Filmmaker. And what does work in Source Filmmaker are characters that rely on many different powers, i.e. lots of abilities such as the Force, Genjutsu, or whatever Dracula and Ganon have, and characters who have very cartoonish designs, similar to Yoda and King Mickey, along with Ganon and Dracula. Also, lighting is complete sex in Source Filmmaker. It just looks amazing. That's why the first two Source Filmmaker fights were good, and this one sucked ass. But yeah, good pacing, good research, a couple decent shots in the animation, but everything else just kinda sucks ass. It's better than Zuko Hot, that's for sure. Shiro vs. Wonder Woman is fucking boring. Like, it's weird. It's not inherently bad, it's just kinda lackluster. When I saw this matchup was announced, I originally thought back to that old leak back in Season 4. The one that had most Season 4 episodes leaked and some being pushed back until next year, i.e. Season 5. Now, unlike most other peeps seeing this matchup was going to happen, I was interested. The connections aren't super in-depth other than Amazonian princesses who are basically the ambassadors to a self-isolated group of people who actually end up gaining their powers from an all-powerful god. But overall, I think it's enough to work as an episode. The pre-analysis was pretty decent overall. Not great, but I think it works. And then there's the debate of this episode, which is the most interesting part about it. This episode, when it was announced, had a lot of stuff going on with it. A lot of people were siding with Shiro, and the other people were siding with Wonder Woman. It was interesting to see what people were saying about either side. I like that. I love when a matchup has debate to it. It sparks conversation and keeps the matchup in people's minds longer. It also makes it more interesting as an idea overall, too. And of course, most people are respectful about it. Then there's the animation, which isn't as bad as I remembered it. In fact, I actually enjoyed a good portion of the animation. It had some cool moments to it. Both Shiro and Wonder Woman looked pretty good as well. And there were interesting things done with the animation. But with every good piece of animation, there's something holding it back. The lines in animation at times can be pretty cringy to look at, and a few portions of the animation look pretty bland and generic. Like any altar scene looks really fucking boring to watch though, but overall, there are some good things to watch in this animation. The invisible jet thing was a nice little Easter egg. Wonder Woman at the end with that cool sword slash is awesome. And to be honest with you, anything in the forest is just kick-ass to watch. And then there's the death. Holy shit was the death brutal. Like, this is probably the most what the fuck death scene I've seen in an episode of Death Battle in a long ass time. Probably the most brutal of the season. So overall, I don't think this episode is as bad as most people put it, but it's not outstanding either. It's just kinda meh, in my opinion. Also, the track is pretty bland as well, but overall, I think it's a fine episode just existing over the other two at least. God, why did they have to bring back Wonder Woman a third time, man? Now all we need to do is wait for Shazam and Doomsday to come back. Ah yes, Venom vs. Krona. The matchup we all wanted to see. Am I right, guys? Once again, like Amazonian scissors, I wasn't super disappointed when this episode was happening. I was angry, however. It was another SpiderMan character and another street tier. Since we just had Miles in the season opener and Winter Soldier vs. Red Hood was the episode before this. But when I saw the animation, I gotta say, I was kind of impressed. There was no jank to it this time, and it looked very smooth, much better than Zuko Hot. Also, both had pretty good voice actors overall. Adam Winnick did a great job as Venom, and I was shocked that they got Sarah Ann Williams to voice Krona. Which is ironic, because her most iconic role is voicing a pink-haired small Wally.
I love them up, you see.
What I really like about the animation is how well it captures the movements of both characters. Krona moves very similar to how they do in Soul Eater, and most of Venom's animations just look great overall. I say most because despite the movement, it does have some drawbacks. For one, Venom still acts like Carnage for the most part, and I know that's how he acted in the cartoon, but I was really hoping for a deeper voice similar to the movie. Which leads me to my second issue of this episode, the missed opportunities of Venom. In the original script for this episode, they had both Venom and Ragnarok talking shit to each other. That would have been cool to see, and would have been a really better dynamic to the episode overall, in my opinion. Besides good content, I do dislike the flying scene. It's too damn dark in some scenes at certain points. Ragnarok doesn't have a lot of involvement dialogue-wise, which is kind of sad because he's the best part of the animation, and it's pretty uninteresting in certain portions. And while the death isn't super bad, it can be better. And I do think some of the fighting is a bit slow. Like at the beginning, Death Battle puts Winter Soldier and Miles at relativistic and FTL reactionary speeds. Death Battle with Venom, yes, but actually no. It just seems really bad in terms of presentation, in my opinion. But overall, I would say it's a lot better than I thought. Now my only question is why wasn't it Shiro vs. Krona? It's like a Tootsie Pop commercial. The world may never know. Ah yes, the Screaming Hoe death battle that everyone saw coming. An idea that's been around since the very beginning of the show, and it's not that bad. Surprisingly enough, I didn't have many issues with this episode. Starting with the idea, again, not very complicated in terms of connections. Bitches who scream is really all you need for this. Second, the research. Not bad at all either. In fact, I actually liked it. Again, these characters are straightforward as fuck, so there wasn't much that's needed to be done for them. Next, the animation. Overall, it was fun. They actually made a scream fight entertaining and not annoying. In fact, I think the fight overall has a nice flow to it, with decent one-liners and a good mix of abilities in hand-to-hand combat from both Canary and Sindel. Though I will say Sindel's model looks stand-out-ish is the best I got for it. And then the rest of the episode was just kind of meh. The soundtrack is pretty bland, the death, while okay, doesn't look the best, and post-analysis is fairly forgettable. Though again, nothing in the episode is super complicated. I think it's the effects of it's been requested for so long and now they did it syndrome, where they finally do a highly requested fight, and once that's done, they're just kind of like, okay. Also, this episode bizarrely was hit with the death battle curse, where something came up after the episode aired and now Sindel probably stops. Overall, I would say this episode is fine, existing, and it's not bad at all. It's just kinda there. Danny vs. Jake hurts me by existing. Okay, I should elaborate. This matchup should have been Danny vs. Yusuke. Okay, moving on. Okay. In all seriousness, no. I actually enjoyed this episode. Yeah, no kidding. For as much as I absolute shit-stomped this was for Danny, it was very enjoyable. The research, while condensed down quite a bit, wasn't too bad, and Jake being above building at all was kind of shocking to me. As for animation, while at first it starts off slow, it quickly evolves into both Danny and Jake throwing their entire arsenals at each other. Danny using ice to counter Jake's fire, Danny and Jake cloning each other, and both of them flying through the buildings at insane speeds. I love the creativity on display in this fight. It makes for great animation, and it definitely shows. Granted, it does start out pretty slow when they're in the museum, but it does pick up speed very quickly, always having something going on at all times, which is backed by the soundtrack that's based as fuck. However though, while the animation is fun to watch and the music is great, the rest of the episode, on the other hand, is just kinda okay. I didn't find anything super stand-outish to me, and I get it, Danny curbs Jake, but why you gotta lie about Lightspeed Jake and Lowball Danny?
Don't give me hope.
Also, I just don't care about it as a matchup in general. I think the episode is good, but not, like, outstanding, so I can't really put it higher on the list. Genos vs. War Machine is what I call a very underrated episode. An episode that gets way more flack than it should. Now, what do people dislike about this episode? For one, the matchup. While a lot of people don't like this idea, it isn't as bad as Genos' other ideas. Hell, he either stops or gets stopped in 95% of his other ideas, so I don't see an issue here. Also, all of his other matchups, besides Raiden from Metal Gear, are just bad. Cyborg is stupid, 17 can fight Cyborg, Penny is meh overall, and Bakugo's only aesthetically pleasing. This, I feel, had enough connections to not only work, but offer a decent episode overall. And for the connections, it's basically the two bro/shy kicks of extremely popular superheroes who always find themselves biting off more than they can chew. Along with this, their first encounters was with their mentors/friends in a life or death situation. Also, they're sort of mentored by their heroes at the same time. It's decent enough, and there are matchups that have less connections than this. See Handymans for an example. Next, the research. It's kind of fine, but I do think that they Lobo Genos a lot in the episode. I mean, I know this was before the Psycho Rochi thing happened, but you could have scaled into Tatsumaki's thing, and Rody would have still been stronger and faster. Also, I think the post-analysis is kind of too short, if you ask me. Granted, it does get straight to the point, so I'll give it that. However, though, what this episode makes up for is the animation. I fucking love the hand-drawn animation in this episode. All the animation looks smooth and clean, along with there always being something going on during the fight. Also, there's just so many cool shots in the episode. From Genos pulling himself back together while his fist distracting Rhodey, to both of them getting into a power struggle with the Unibeam and an Incinerate. Other good moments include the Pimp Smack, Genos covering Rhodey and the adhesive, and Rhodey nonchalantly phasing through his Genos' blasts. That's probably the best moment in the episodes besides Don't Talk to Me. All in all, it has flaws, but I found myself enjoying it more than hating it. Now my only question is, why the fuck didn't Genos say Incinerate? Oh boy, this one. A matchup that everyone saw coming from a mile away. Now, for those who don't know, I don't like Nightwing vs. Daredevil. I really don't like Nightwing vs. Daredevil. I think the fight was super lackluster and the episode overall is just really bland, which is a shame because I actually like that idea. Now, going into this episode, my expectations were pretty low, considering it was a live action episode, but I was shocked that I actually enjoyed it, because it actually feels like a fight. Plus, there's just something going on every moment. There's sometimes slipping, yes, but there are other things going on than just that. Like gunplay, hand-to-hand, knife work. I mean, it's just really good. Every time they hit each other, it feels like there's some sort of weight behind every hit. With Nightwing vs. Daredevil, it never felt that way for me. It felt like they were just kinda slightly tapping each other or putting each other in chokeholds. But here, they're punching each other really hard, they're stabbing each other. Hell, they're even disabling each other's gear in most of the fight as well. It feels like there's weight to everything, and I love that. I also just love the cinematography in this episode. From the knife fight in the kitchen door scene, and any scene where Jason goes Batman by bamboozling Bucky. I also like the music in this fight as well. It's super subtle, but it works extremely well. I think my two favorite moments are when Bucky beats Jason with a crowbar, which is just funny and a nice callback, and both of them are taking a breather, which I thought was also funny. Now, while I like the fight and I love the matchup, it does have flaws, go figure. For one, while I do like the pre-analysis, personally I have no issues with it, the post-analysis was really bad. Like, the way it explains how Bucky won is worse than Ben versus Green Lantern. For one, they could have said Bucky was more experienced than Jason. rather than flat out saying he had better training, because that's what I got by listening to this. Also, having a Beast Golden Tree moment for Jason and not Bucky with the Tesseract and Supergirl's shit is stupid. Also, the killing blow is just boring. I get it's live action, but what should have happened after it was when the helmet explodes. But besides that, I enjoyed this episode greatly, and I think it's a massive improvement over Nightwing vs. Daredevil. I just wish this fight was better than the other fights on this list. Oh well. What? A Power Ranger episode that isn't a Megazord? What a pleasant surprise! Whoa! Power Ranger, no Megazord! Now, I actually have a funny story about this fight. So the night before Sindel vs. Canary came out on YouTube, me, Red Runner, and an admin I will refer to as Junior were discussing what the next time was going to be. We knew that the next time was going to be 2 returning combatants. We had no idea what was it going to be. And since I was going to be in Red's reactions, I couldn't watch the episode early as usual. Basically, we were throwing out ideas for a bit when I randomly said, "You think it could be this?" as I posted this thumbnail in chat. We laughed it off as a nothing burger, but boy was I surprised. I actually fucking predicted it right. I don't know how, but I did. Regardless, I had pretty high hopes for the episode. It seemed cool to get just a Ranger, not a Megazord this time, and unironically, it gives the Power Rangers a higher chance of winning a fight than the Megazords themselves. And oh boy, did Jason make turtle soup. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The idea overall is pretty good. Power Rangers vs. TMNT is something I've always wanted to see them do, and these two have decent connections overall for it to work. The fight, I would say, is definitely one of the best this season. It has a lot of cheesy one-liners and interesting interactions to boot, like Leo reflecting the lasers with his shell, the dinosaur charge, and the killing blow is a great callback to how Power Rangers villains always explode in a blaze of glory. I also really love the music, go figure. It's a nice mix of arcade-like music with that 90s ring to it. I love it. The research was also pretty good, too, covering everything that I thought they would cover. Honestly, I don't have any issues with it, other than maybe there being a bit of snippets here and there, but it's barely noticeable. And to me, overall, I don't think this episode is super memorable. At least for me. But it's still an enjoyable view. I just think it gets overshadowed by the other episodes on this list. Also, the Power Rangers finally won. Hooray! Sanji vs. Lee was better than I thought. Now, if you stuck with me over the past few years, I never liked Sanji vs. Lee. It just seems so mad to me. I really didn't want any more Naruto other than Madara vs. Aizen and Vader vs. Obito. I think it was just the overuse of the series in recent years, thanks to getting 2 Naruto episodes in the same season. But I gotta say, I was actually shocked at how much I enjoyed this episode. Call it my One Piece bias, but I just have a good time watching this episode. The pre-analysis was pretty good, doing a good job at lowballing while not making both like building level. And yes, I do agree with the episode. Even lowballing both, Sanji would still outstat. Besides stats, what about the animation? Pretty good. I love how smooth most of the puppet animation looks. I know some people have issues with it, and I will admit I do have issues with it. Like, I don't like Lee's voice. I think it's annoying and doesn't fit him at all. And there's this missing frame right here with the animation. Other than that, I don't have any other issues with it. I know most people would say they have issues with Lee rushing through his gates and the metal clanking noise whenever Sanji lands a hit, but frankly I just don't really care about the gates thing, mainly because I just thought they were trying to get as many gates in for Lee as they could, with the short amount of time they had. Also, I just don't care for Naruto in general, so I can't really say I cared all that much about it, and the metal clanking sound is most likely a reference to Sanji using armament hockey, which does make a metal clanking noise in the anime, but everything else I really enjoyed. Again, the puppet animation looks pretty good. Sanji specifically looks smooth as hell, and while Lee does have some jank here and there, overall it's still pretty good. And I like the fact that they had the raid suit for Sanji in the episode to go alongside the 8th gates for Lee. Along with it, it's pretty much doing something most of the time. It's constant movement, and I like that. Also, Drunk Lee is best Lee, don't at me. And I really like some of the creative shots this has. I love Sanji spinning off Lee's leg to basically ignite it, to Lee shattering Sanji's foot, which also caught me off guard the first time I saw it. I also really like all the hand-drawn stuff too in the episode. And of course, them ending the fight with this is just great. Also, the track is bass, but that goes without saying. Overall, for every scene I disliked, there were 2 other things I liked. And I do think this is the best we've gotten in terms of representing One Piece. Death is pretty epic, and this is coming from a dude who hates both animes. Now, unlike most other people in the community who were shocked by this, I kinda figured they were gonna do this fight eventually. This has been a fight that's been circling around since season 1 and 2. And to be honest with you, it's not a complicated fight, but it has decent enough connections. The connections are as basic as you can get. Last survivors of their tribes joined an organization that's basically a military militia of some kind, and ice powers. And not really a connection, but it's basically a stripper versus a dominatrix, which I find hilarious. Also, what's funny is the fact that Gray basically fits the bill for what Death is looking for in a man, which is extremely hilarious to me. And to be honest with you, I think the animation in this fight does better wonders than Lee versus Rock Lee. Hence why it got a higher placement on the list than that matchup. For one, the animation looks a lot smoother than that episode and perfectly captures both characters. I like the massive amount of creativity in the battle as well. It isn't just them shooting ice at each other the entire time. Gray's making weapons as Death basically uses her powers to outmaneuver Gray, and even blast the Kant into deep freeze. It's also cool that they decided to start the battle with her ice cavalry. It offers more animation potential, and this cool moment when she uses Commander-in-Chief. Along with this, Gray's ice constructs was also very creative, with numerous ones used in the fight. I even like the character portrayals in the episode. They nailed everything I wanted to do with Gray, from the shirt gag to his personality in general, along with Death. Like, them bitch be crazy. As for everything else, I'm not too picky about what I see in an analysis, as long as it's accurate for the characters, though I do think the speed could be better for Gray. In fact, I think he blitzes Death, which leads me into what I really like about this episode, the debate, which is very interesting to say the least. Basically, if Gray was faster, he could just suicide move and kill Death before Death can one-shot him. Lost I Shall would give Gray the dub since Death Battle takes suicide moves as a win con. Basically a might for an example. But then there was the argument of speed being irrelevant, and Death could just nuke him. And not gonna lie, the nuking argument made a lot more sense than the suicide one. Considering Gray can't absorb ice that's stronger than his own, and Death's isn't magic, so... And I think the track is okay. It's good on first listen, but I think it kind of gets worse the more you listen to it. I don't know, that's just me. Another issue I have is the dialogue in the fight. I think it was kind of cringy at times, but to be fair, Death is a fucking cringy character, and so is Gray sometimes, so whatevs. Also, while the animation is good, it kind of gets overshadowed by the other sprite fights a bit. Speaking of which... This fight is just awesome. There's no other words to describe it. It's just cool. I don't think I need to explain why that is. It's two werewolves ripping each other apart. This fight at first was really worrying for me, because it was slow, kind of dark, and pretty matte overall. Thank God that changed after the preview. The fight is just super fun and has a lot of great moments to it. From the fight on the wall, the burning dragon, and even the scene where Saber bites John's shoulder. Oh yeah, did I mention this fight is extremely gory? On this episode alone, we got skin ripping, blood spattering, mangled and burnt corpses, and intestinal strangling, all leading up to a brutal kill. The biggest thing I dislike about this episode is some of the research was kinda like using lifting strength as striking strength, and using Anacars for energy output for John, but I think the way they explain it isn't super bad. It's just kinda weird to me. Every other feat and piece of info I found to be fine, and that's kinda it. I liked basically everything else in the episode. I thought the fight was really cool. Every hit had force to it. The music was fitting and rocks, and the research overall is just really good. This one I don't have a lot to say since it's a very basic episode overall, and it's mostly just straight to the point for what it is. A cool werewolf fight that will most likely be remembered and become a gem amongst the community. But yeah, that's it. Next. Jumping from werewolves to overused death battle memes, we have Cable vs. Booster Gold, one of my favorite Marvel vs. DC matchups. Another idea I've always been on board with. Not just because it's Cable versus Booster Gold, not only because we could make more Ben versus Hal jokes, which by the way I bring up because 1, it ends in a similar fashion, and 2, this fight was supposed to happen after Weiss versus Mitsuru, but Ben versus Hal got backlash, and thus pushed back to 2020. But besides that, the reason I like this fight is because it's Cable fighting Booster Gold. Why wouldn't this be good? Also, I love the complete polar opposites of these two. It's a gritty badass from Marvel Comics versus DC's golden asshole. It also helps that the fight is just really good. Cable's launching cars at Booster Gold, Booster's doing Legend of Zelda references, and oh yeah, there's this scene where Cable launches Booster into a million next weeks. It's somewhat short, yes, but it has some awesome and funny scenes to boot. I feel they nailed the Booster Gold perfectly in the animation. The overcocking and stupid personality works wonders here, and the serious over-the-top Cable is just amazing. And for those who dislike Booster Gold, you'll like the fact that he gets his ass kicked most of the fight, which I will say is one of the downsides of the fight. But you don't see me complaining. I think the big issue I have with this fight is Booster's colors. I think the Neo Yellow looks a bit off. It looks more like he dipped into Chernobyl pools one too many times than gold. Another thing I dislike is the T-Rex scene. I can't tell if it's stupid, hilarious, or bad. I think it's a mix of all three. But overall, the rest of the episode and animation looks good. Cable's weapons are pretty neat, and Booster's references to Justice League Action, Legend of Zelda, and Death Battle itself, which is always fun. And the research, while some of it is a bit weird, is perfectly passable in my opinion. It's just a fun time for everyone. A shame it's a missed opportunity that we didn't get another time joke.
Show me.
Ooh boy, it's time. It's time for the juggernaut of the season. The season finale itself, Hulk vs. Broly. I have a lot to say about this episode, both good and bad. I'm also going to be probably put on someone's hit list for putting this not even in the top 5 my favorite episodes, but just hear me out, alright? Because I probably have the most polarizing look at this episode. Shame I couldn't put it higher because it has, if not, some of the best things going for it. The episode has some amazing animation, some of the best in the series overall. The research in the prelude is actually really good. Some of the best treatment Marvel has gotten in years, though it does have some very glaring issues, but I'll get to that in a bit. Back to the positives, starting with the animation. Because, god damn, the animation's good. At first I was hesitant because of the preview, but it picked up extremely quickly with non-stop action and something going on all the time. It's great. I love the crater scene, the destruction of the South Galaxy reference, Worldbreaker and Legends clashing together, this fucking planet exploding, and probably one of my favorite moments in Death Battle, period.
Hulk smash! Yes! You think you're strong? Hulk's strongest there is! Yes!
Oh, it's so good. The voice line, the music, the animation, the fucking effects. It is insane how good this scene is. But I do have issues with the effects, and now it is time for me to talk about the bad stuff, aka what I didn't like. Oh boy, here we go. Let's start with the animation this time. Something I noticed with the effects is that sometimes the effects would look a bit off. Several times actually with this. Basically, it would look like they were merging with Broly's fucking biceps, which look really weird at times. And for the sound design, it can be very awkward to say the least. Like, sometimes it feels like their hits are too soft and not hard enough. There's also some issues I have with the animation. Like this mouth laser scene, some of Broly's facial expressions look weird from a distance, like right here. This meteor basically phases through Hulk, and this clash just looks like two dudes fist bumping. And I wish, too, they did more with the shattered dimension instead of headbutting a fuck ton of times. Which leads to a massively boring death. On top of that, I didn't like the episode from a research perspective either. Yes, I'm glad they put Marvel higher than Planet this time, but holy shit, it was bad. The way they explained why Broly won is not only wrong, but it makes them look really bad in my opinion, and that's because of multipliers. Now, I don't have an issue with this. If they are stated in canon or stated without contradiction, I think they're fine to use, like the Bankai multipliers for Bleach. But for this, it just feels sort of lazy. Like, you could have just said that Hulk was 2 times universal because of the Hyperion feat, and just say Broly was 18 times universal by fighting Gogeta. That would have been better than calc stacking, that's for sure. Doesn't help that they completely fucked up with it as well. Using the Daizenshi multipliers is one thing, but not using the Pandora's box multiplier for Hulk was really dumb, because in a sense, it was lowballing him. They used the 120 multiplier for him, but like, there's a stated multiplier for him that's higher. They could have used that instead. Listen, Danny's sex bang times is funny as hell, but using it as the main multiplier for Hulk was really dumb. And you know what's dumber? Saying that World Breaker is weaker than Super Saiyan 3. Really?
He would already be 30 times more powerful than World Breaker Hulk. 30 times more powerful than World Breaker Hulk.
30 times more powerful than World Breaker Hulk.
Just do it! Just fucking do it!
The same Hulk who shattered an infinite-sized dimension via the Nightcrawler. The same Hulk who absorbed a shard of Minx, an entity that could kill beings equal to Odin and Galactus. The same Hulk who stalemated Sentry without going full World Breaker. I'm sorry, but no, this shit ain't fucking adding up. World Breaker even having a number in general is dumb, considering the form itself has taken on the same level of power equal to Marvel's Skyfathers, entities who can affect the infinite multiverse of Marvel Comics, and this isn't even bringing up Genis Vale versus Sentry, which depending on what you buy for it, can range Hulk and other heralds from septillion times universal to octillion times universal, which at that point, it don't fucking matter how many multipliers you use for Broly, he's screwed. And no, this isn't just me raging fanboying over Hulk loss. Literally every person I've talked to agrees this episode is just wrong. Yes, even Dragon Ball fans agree it's wrong. Massive rant aside, however, despite the small issues I have with the animation and that god-awful ending set analysis, I enjoyed everything else about it. The matchup is sex-worthy, the preludes were great, most of the animation is spectacular, and the music is based and you know it. But God, fuck the ending to this post-analysis. That shit is worse than Ben 10 vs. Green Lantern, and I will stand by that. Besides, I prefer the best Marvel matchup. I said the best Marvel matchup. Perfection.
Along with this great power comes responsibility. See the light.
I find it quite shocking that this was the matchup they decided to do for Miles. To be fair, his other matchups suck ass, so I guess I shouldn't have been as surprised as I was for this. I'm just thankful as fuck it wasn't Deku. And boy was this episode good. I praise this episode as not only the best Marvel vs. DC fight, I praise this episode overall as the best Marvel episode of the season, with it being also one of the best Sprite fights of the season, only being topped by 2 other matchups on this list. Miles vs. Static just does a great job incorporating both environment and their powers. They climb up buildings, Static uses his disc as a buzzsaw, even using his more obscure abilities like the glow effect to reveal Miles' invisibility. The visual effects too are also great. I love any callback they do with Spider-Verse, like when Miles goes, and also dabs. There's a couple other moments too in the episode like this, like the lookout with the spider sense, and of course the death do be like that. I think what this episode does really well at, it does a great job portraying the characters at their most recognizable medias, along with all the dialogue feeling like it would fit into Spider-Verse or even the Static Shock show. Plus, the voice actors sound like they could actually voice these characters in official media. Honestly, this episode's just great. There's no real big issues or anything with it. Though, I guess you could say that the post and pre-analysis are just pretty forgettable overall. But there's nothing horrible about it, it just exists. God, this is so fucking weird for me. I had so much shit to say about Hulk vs. Broly than Miles vs. Static. I guess I see Miles vs. Static as more of a simple discussion, with no controversy and nothing infuriating about it. I think it's a great Marvel vs. DC episode, and I think it's the best of the season. But it isn't my favorite comic book fight. That honor goes to... Wally vs. Archie Sonic is my favorite Sonic episode in general, and my favorite comic book fight of this season. Man, this was jarring to me. Even before this episode was announced, there was a hint they gave out for this episode, and the hint was this. And the reason that this was the hint is that red and blue be an obscure hint. Yes, I'm not joking. That's how people got Flash vs. Sonic. But man, I'm glad it was this episode. With the disappointment of Zuko Hot, they really needed to pull out all the stops with the next episode. A matchup that's both debatable and insanely over the top. So let's put a DC character against a Sonic character. What could possibly go wrong? Not a lot, actually. To be honest, Flash's bar was risen greatly after Flash vs. Quicksilver was the absolute disappointment it was, and it felt so slow. It was just really bad overall. Meanwhile, Sonic had pretty good episodes. DK vs. Nux, Amy vs. Rona, and I think Mario vs. Sonic 2018 is a good episode. I know for a fact I'm gonna get butchered for saying that. So combine the hype of Sonic coming back with the bar risen with Wally, it needed to be good. And shockingly, it was. Like, extremely good. Despite not a lot going on at the start of the animation, it already starts fast, with the two running on the Cosmic Highway, along with the great banter you would expect from both. Things pick up greatly as the animation goes on. When Super Sonic came out, I knew things were gonna get spicy, with them continuing the fight in the Special Zone. It's great to see the powers they use for both characters and how they incorporate into interesting encounters. Wally steals Sonic's speed, Sonic uses Super Form, Ultrasonic freezes the ground and tries to roast Wally. Wally phases through it. Hell, they even time travel in the episode. Man, DC Heralds really love their time travel, am I right? They even did the funny Time Hunt joke, but instead of Time Hunt thanks for the tip and going back in time, it's Time Hunt thanks for the tip, I'm gonna go forward in time.
Yeah, this is big brain time.
Though instead of a big ass boot stomping Sonic, it ends with Wally bro fisting too hard on Archie Sonic.
Pound it if you're a gamer. Pound it, goddammit!
I can't really say there wasn't anything extremely bad about the animation, because there wasn't. It felt well paced and it displayed a good deal of their powers, including the matter manipulation and even Wally's ability to completely tap into the Speed Force when he goes Super Saiyan. Hey, wait a minute, this is just an over-the-top fun episode. It has enough creativity to keep the fight interesting, the music is astounding, and the reasoning and research for the episode was also incredible. They verbally put both at multiversal and immeasurable when it comes to their stats, and that's just amazing to me. No bullshit lowballing for either, just the good stuff. Granted, I don't like the ending line for Ultrasonic, I think it's kinda cringy, but I don't think that's big enough of an issue to drag this episode down at all, considering the rest of the episode just outshines it. Overall, I'd say it was a well done episode, with fast-paced action and creative animation, and my favorite comic book fight of this season. Goro vs. Machamp is my favorite Pokemon episode. Now, from the last time we saw Pokemon, it was against the Digimon. And while those episodes are okay, I mean Lucario vs. Venom was gonna happen eventually, we can do better. And better we did. Goro vs. Machamp, if I had to describe it, is just so fucking goofy, man. I mean, we're talking about one of the characters being from the most violent video games of all time versus a Pokemon of all things. Which makes this probably one of the best scenarios I've ever seen for a death battle. And it just keeps getting better, especially the animation. There's so many great things about it. First, the voice acting. They literally got a dude to say Machamp a bunch of times. 10 out of 10, best performance of 2020, give this man an Oscar. Seriously, it seems like a small thing, but it goes to show this episode is just great. Like, you have this dude who is a proud king of his species that can rip your limbs off. And then you have this cartoon monster that only says one word. It's fucking hilarious, man. The cartoon aspect also plays into the animations. A lot of scenes have this insanely cartoonish Toon Force look to them, which just adds more personality to the animation. Also, my favorite scene is when Goro does a seismic toss and then he dabs at the end. Best moment of the animation, baby. Another thing I like is how much more Unga Bunga both get as the fight goes on. From them just simply trading blows to cracking skulls, from dabbing to dismemberment, the fight starts to look more like a Mortal Kombat game as it goes on. Another great thing about the animation is just because it's Pokemon. You have a lot of things you can do with this matchup, considering the fact that Pokemon have a very versed and variety moveset at their disposal, giving them insanely good animation potential, and we see it here in this fight. Using knockoff on Goro's weapons was super creative, and my actual favorite scene is when Machamp uses Cross Chop and Rock Smash at the same time. It makes for a really cool shot. And then there's the death, which is just insanely over the top, and a JoJo reference. It's just a fun time from beginning to end. It's a fight people can just sit down and watch without having getting into the nitty-grittiness of stats, power scaling, and complicated math problems. It's also my favorite video game fight of the season, which, to be fair, not exactly hard to top. Also, One Finger Death Punch fucking slaps. You know, this got me thinking, why do so many episodes this season start over fucking food? Starting the top 3 off, we have the best anime fight of the season, and probably my favorite Dragon Ball episode since Dan vs. Hercules, Beerus vs. Galaxia. This episode does everything so well, it's insane. First, the animation. This definitely is the best sprite fight they've ever made. Not only is the animation fluent, but the creativity of their powers meshes so well into the animation. I love the fact that both of them are immune to existence erasure, so they just nuke the surrounding area. Them clashing at full power looks absolutely insane and one of the hypest moments in the episode. Though I think the hypest scene in the actual episode is Beerus going Ultra Instinct and then mollywopping Galaxia. Hell, I even like when they get knocked to different planets. It gives us a direct contrast as to what they would actually do if they were knocked there. Beerus would destroy the planet, Galaxia would just bend them to their will. Though I will say one of the biggest downsides in this episode is Galaxia herself. I think Galaxia is handled a bit in the episode. Like, her actions and her dialogue are a bit kind of overshadowed by Beerus's. Like, Beerus has, if not some of the best one-liners in the show's history in this episode, such as,
"It's unwise to vaporize a god's dessert.
And
That was for my ice cream."
it's some good stuff, but I wish Galaxia had some more memorable lines, in my opinion. Granted, that's not to say that she doesn't have, say, good moments in the episode. I just think her dialogue was kind of weak compared to Beerus's. Besides dialogue, I really like the music, go figure. It does a very good job mixing in the chorus for Hakai while not sounding completely out of place. Zuko vs. Todoroki. Bad episodes aside, I think that everything in the animation does a great job portraying the characters. And while I don't give a damn about the pre-analysis, there was one joke that completely caught me off guard and made me shoot water out of my nose. That inflation joke is the funniest joke they've made in recent years. Also, while the pre and post analysis aren't bad, I think it's just overshadowed by the animation. But to be fair, that's the part that most people will usually skip to in these videos. Really, the only thing I actually disliked about the episode was the hand-drawn segment with Beerus at the end. But literally everything else here is perfect. The voice acting is incredible, the animation is smooth, and while the reasoning for why Beerus won is a bit weird at times, it's perfectly passable. A highlight episode of the season and one that will be remembered. I wonder how his non-Hades matchups would go. Oh yeah. America, fuck yeah, coming again to save the motherfucking season. Ooh baby, what a ride. While I am one of many people who don't give a rat's ass about Ruby, and a man who forgot Genlock was a thing, I always will remember the gem that is Red vs. Blue. One of the few indie shows that have grown above the standards of shows of its time, even getting an okayish spin-off sequel series with Red vs. Blue Zero. But one question still remains since the dawn of time. Who would actually win a fight, Red or Blue? Despite there being only one other episode being Red vs. Blue related, that being Carolina vs. Meta, Red Blue holds that torch high with some of the best banter besides one other episode, and the fight straight up feeling like something directly out of the show. Granted, there are some differences, the main one being the voice actors. See, Caboose's voice actors seem to have, disagreements with his contract, and Tex and Sheila don't have a single voice line in the fight due to their actors flying the coop. It's not that bad, but it sort of feels weird. It almost feels like a reboot of the show itself. But besides that, everything else is still as Red vs. Blue it can be. The fight literally starts because Caboose does something stupid, and Red Team ends up taking their flag, which Caboose then chases them down with Sheila. It's some goofy shit and I love it. Speaking of, how's that animation looking? Spicy. With every little scene of animation, the team do be flexing its mocapsy muscles. Every fight scene just looks freaking great in this episode. Along with this, the very, very little details in the episode also just make this absolutely fun to watch through again. The teleporter not working, Church being a worse sniper than a TF2 free-to-play, Donut being a dunking master, and making sure Griff has no expansion in his family tree. You know, I would tell him to wear a cup, but Tex can punch right through that bitch, so... Plus, I think that the hand-to-hand fighting is very good. Tex and Tucker in particular are just extremely fun to watch, as they basically beat the crap out of Red, which I would complain about being one-sided animation-wise, but like, it's 100% in character for Tex to murk Red Team, so I don't have a big issue with it. You could say that the deaths besides Grifta and Lopez aren't good, but I mean, do you really want Sarge to get dismembered by a laser sword, or do you just want him to plop over like a fish and make a goofy noise while he does it? Speaking of which, Caboose probably has the highest body count in Death Battle. This episode to me is just one big nostalgic trip. To run down a show I loved as a kid, and to see it get more representation outside of the popular requests is just great to me. Now my only question is when we gonna get Caboose in Dragon Ball FighterZ as a DLC character? Come on man, make it happen. Okay, I was gonna do a full segment on this, but this is kind of just a bonus episode, so I'll just give my quickie thoughts on it. It exists for me. It's not bad, it's not good. I think it's kinda in the middle for me. It's got some fun shit going for it. I like the animation. I like Billy in the episode. He's just fun times to watch. It's also cool they got Kano's voice actor to play him in the episode. And Wiz and Boomstick as commentators was pretty neat as well. Other than that, I really don't care about the rest of the episode. Anyway, let us move on to the number 1 spot now. What did you expect? General Kenobi, we've been expecting you. Yeah, seems about right. And oh yeah, baby. What the hell were you expecting? Me doing this ranking list and not putting this outside of the top 3 is like making a top 10 aliens and not putting crypto on there. For anyone who gets that reference, you get a cookie. YouTuber jokes aside, this is probably the best episode of the season. It does basically everything in its power to be enjoyable and goes beyond that. Matchup-wise, it's super thematic and works remarkably well interaction-wise. I mean, it's Obi-Wan versus Kakashi. Why wouldn't it be good? Besides personality, both have a shit ton of abilities that they can use at their disposal, which can make for a very memorable fight. As I said before, I think Source Filmmaker does 3 things exceptionally well. Lighting, cartoonish characters, and fights that rely mostly on varied abilities. And that's the big reason this fight succeeded while Batgirl vs. Spider-Gwen failed. It incorporates the various powers the two have with very little hand-to-hand and more of them launching shit at each other and countering what they can do. Besides their abilities, it also has some stellar shots. The Darth Vader Genjutsu scene in particular is absolutely amazing and looks so badass too. And of course the final standoff looks pretty great too, despite the death being kinda eh. Plus, it's an Obi-Wan episode. You know for a fact there's gonna be some legendary dialogue. The dialogue in general is just great. Kakashi throwing Obi-Wan's one-liner back at him is just funny to me. And oh, the prequel memes are strong with this one. Now, I will say there is one issue I will bring up with this episode, and that's how they handled Kakashi. See, the thing is, he was kind of lowball, like, greatly. I understand what they were going for, saying Obi-Wan slaps in any scenario, but the way it was worded made it seem like Kakashi was only mountain busting at most, despite them putting Guy at Island later with Sanji versus Lee. But other than that comeuppance and a little bit of source filmmaker jank here and there, I can't really say I have any other issues with the episode, and I'd like to keep it that way, because only a Sith deals in absolutes. And that is it. That is all of Season 7 ranked for me. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. This was a very fun video to make, though. It took a while, but I finally got around to finishing it, which, to be honest with you, it came out pretty well in my opinion. Though I think I need to improve on a couple things. Audio quality for first, as you probably can tell, and my script writing, but I think we'll get there when we get there. It's a working process, and I'm willing to sit through it and work it out. My overall thoughts on this season are actually pretty simple, honestly. I think this is just an average season to me. It's not as bad as people say it is. It's not as good as people say it is. I think it's a pretty good middle ground as to what you would expect from the show. Though I think that having 20 episodes a season kind of bogs down the quality of the episodes by a lot. Granted, there are gems in there, but I mean, I think 16 is more than enough for a year. And we're seeing that right now with Season 8, though. I think every episode this season, not you, have been pretty above average and just overall way better than most of the episodes of Season 7. I mean, hell, Yo Dickie's probably the best episode they've ever made, period. So, and it just seems to keep getting better, with Poe vs. Iron Fist just getting announced today as I'm recording this, so that's going to be very fun to watch in weeks coming. I have another Death Battle video planned, and it'll be out in weeks' times, but I also want to branch out from Death Battle content and move over to other topics such as video games and TV shows, mainly with other top 10s. Like, one top 10 I have planned, and I'll give you a spicy taste right now, is top 9 TF2 classes. TF2 is a fantastic game, and I really want to cover it in some way, shape, or form, and I think this is a good way to start with it. And yeah, that is it. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.